Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we move into sound and a little bit more with graphics, so it'll be a little bit of fun. First thing we need to do is to work with sound is to install the library. Libraries are just code written by other programmers just to make it easy to do some of the repetitive tasks. So instead of having to write all of the sound code each and every time, you can use other people's code. In this case, if you go up to the top library, choose Sketch, Import Library, then Add Library, you'll actually find a screen that looks like this. And then up here, search for the word sound. Hit enter there, and you'll see all of the libraries that other people have written dealing with sound. And the one we want is the sound library for processing written by the Processing Foundation, the people who actually wrote the language. If you would highlight that, and then once you've gotten that, go ahead and click the install button down below. You'll see that it takes a few minutes for it to install because it's going to have to download it from the internet. Don't worry, just hang tight for a little bit. I realize that can be a little bit painful. Once it's downloaded, you should be able to close that window. And now we actually get to work with it. Now, to work with a library that you've brought in, you actually have to do something unusual. We have to import it first. So in this case, this goes up above the top of our game. We're going to say import processing.sound.* semicolon. What does that mean? We're importing a library from the Processing Foundation. It's called Sound, and the asterisk here is a wildcard. It says we want to import every single method from that library. And that's just a sort of shortcut instead of having to specify which ones we want to use. You can if you want. Now, how do we use it? Well, it turns out it's pretty easy. Remember, we've used variables like integer before, and we used a variable like pimage, processing image. To use a sound file, we're going to create a new variable of type sound file. And then we're just going to create two variable names. I'm going to do boink and splash. And by the way, putting a comma between here, it means you're going to define both of these as of this type of sound file. So we're creating two variables of type sound file, boink and splash, semicolon there. And now in setup, remember before in setup we loaded the bucket image? Well, now we're actually going to go ahead and load in the sound files. Now the format here is a little bit different. We're going to say, hey, inside of our boink variable, could you please load in a new sound file called boink.aiff, in quotation marks. The this in this case is a very specific word. It's a key word inside a lot of language. It says import this file into this program. Literally is what this means. And then we do the same thing with the splash. New sound file in this program called splash.aiff. And then from that we're actually able to use them. How do we use them? It's fairly simple. When we want to play the splash sound, we simply use the splash variable .play method. And at that point, it's going to play that sound. And down here, if we lose the game, we're going to play boink.play. Yeah, you could load in other sound files as well. You could do like a really sad sound, which is one of the files I loaded. But checkpoint 11, please show your working Zoog game with falling Zoog, moving buckets, scoring, and sound. So every time Zoog hits the bucket, you should hear a splash. And if you lose the game, you should hear a boink or something. I forget what the sound sounds like. Now, there's one last thing I need to mention on this one before I go on. Sound files and images actually need to be placed in a subdirectory called data in the folder where your sketch is stored. By default on the Mac, the sketches are stored in a folder called processing in your documents folder. So if you go to your documents folder and then look for processing folder, you should see each of the things that we've made before. Each of the programs are in their own unique folder. Well, right now I'm working on ZoogGame_01C. You might have a different name. You're going to need to create a subfolder inside of this folder. So here's the whole game folder. Here's the actual game file. It's this one right down here. We're going to have to create a subfolder in it called data. And then in that data folder, you need to copy over the sound files you want. In this case, all we really need are the boink file and the splash sound here. But I brought over some Flappy, a SAD, and a Splash 3. You can switch sound files if you want. But the key is that they've got to be in a subdirectory in the folder where your current game is stored. And the folder name should be the same as the name of the program file that you have or you've saved it most recently. So once you get that done, let me go back a second. Just again, show us once you've got that one with the working sounds. Remembering that you've got to put them into a subfolder called data, all lowercase, in whatever folder your thing is saved. All right, moving on. Graphic backgrounds. Right now we've got a white background. It's okay, but it's not great. I'd like you to add one more thing in this case. So remember we talked about the comma before? So we already have a p image variable called bucket. I'd like to add another one called sky. And you can name anything you want. Sky is just logical. And down here, when we load the bucket, we're also going to load a sky image. And so you're going to have to, because this one's going to be local, you'll need to put sky.jpg in that same data subfolder of your program to make this work. You'll find that again on the USB or on the files category in Canvas. Just copy it over there. Yes, I could have given you a URL for this as well, but I'm worried as we add more and more things loading from the internet, it could take longer for your game to start. So ideally, if you're actually making a production game, you would keep all of the images and sound files in that data subfolder so it's local so you don't have to wait for it to download. And now here's the interesting part. How do we make the background sky? Well, you might remember the background statement before this, we gave it 3 numbers, just like the stroke and fill command. In this case, we had made it 255, 255, comma 255. Well, it turns out the background method is actually smarter than that. If you instead send it a variable that contains a p image, it says, oh, okay, instead of doing a solid color, I want to actually draw that image. So in this case, each time around the loop, it's going to draw the sky image on the background. And then when you run your game, you'll have the bucket and Zoog in front of it, which is kind of cool. This is your 12th checkpoint. Once you get this working, please show us so we can see it. Now you should have sound, background, scoring. And this is as far as we're going to take the Zoog game. Yes, you could play with a little bit more. You could try doing some creative things with Zoog, the bucket, and things, but this is enough for this game. Which now takes me to our next game. Our next game is Floppy Bird. Not to be confused with the registered and trademarked Flappy Bird. In this case, we're going to make this game. And you'll notice how it works. Again, you're just using the up and down arrow keys and trying to get your bird through the various little pieces here. If you do, the score goes up. If you crash, your game is over. And so we're going to be playing with this in a little bit. Oh, yeah, I just died. So how do we get started on this one? Well, a couple of quick notes on this one. With the Zoog game, I basically gave you all of the code. But this time I want you, either individually or with your partner, to do a lot of the game design yourself. And you're like, whoa, wait a second, how do we even get started on something like this? Well, all right, I'll get you started. Just to get you, for example, to get the bird on here that you're able to control it going up and down. No walls yet, no rectangles, no score. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. So first of all, I'm going to create a couple of variables. The Y position of the bird, I'm going to initially set at 100. So I'm going to set it 100 pixels down from the top. That's going to change, and that's why I'm keeping it as a variable, not 100 meters, sorry. It's pixels. It's supposed to be, it looks like meters. 100 and pixels down from there. And I'm going to load the bird in the sky. And the bird is phoenix.png. The sky is the sky.jpg. Again, it has to be in the data subfolder, so make sure you move them there. And then in the draw method, what I'm going to do here is draw the sky, then draw the bird. So draw the image stored in the bird variable. I'm going to draw it 50 over from the side here. I'm going to keep that fixed as 50 over because the bird doesn't need to move horizontally. And then draw whatever the bird Y variable contains, initially 100. And then down here, I'm going to increment the that variable by 1 each time around the loop. So it's going to add 1 60 times per second. What's that going to do our bird? The bird is going to start falling. And then one additional step, we're going to add a key press method just like we've had before, but this time instead of looking for left and right, we're going to be looking for the up and down arrow keys. Yes, you could define it as letter keys as well, but up and down arrow keys are pretty easy. And what's it going to do? If we go up, we're going to subtract 15 from the bird Y. And if we click down, we want to add 15 to the bird Y. So it's going to move it up and down. If you run this point, you should actually have control of the bird. Without touching anything, the bird will slowly move down the screen, but using the arrow keys, you should be able to move it up and down. You can change these values if you wanted to move a little faster. I think these are just about right, but you can play with the 15s if you want a little bit. But it's a good starter code, so this is the part I'm giving you as a freebie. Once you get this working, show it to us for checkpoint number 13. Our next step is drawing the rectangles, or so the walls that are coming towards us, and they're just rectangles. How do we make them move? Well, we're going to be using a bunch of integer variables, column x, column height, column gap, and column width. And we're going to be changing these as the program executes, so we'll make these all variables. Again, remember the top corner of the screen over here is 0, 0. So here's a couple of questions I have for you. The coordinates here for this top rectangle are very, very simple. But what are the coordinates for this point down here? Think about in terms of the x and y based upon the variables I've given you. Well, the x coordinate you should sort of realize is, okay, it's column x, the same as this one. But the y value is going to be the height of this one, which is column height, plus whatever the column gap is. And so you should sort of say, okay, the coordinates for that top corner is that. And you might say, well, why is that so important? Well, to draw a rectangle, remember how you do one. You have to specify the starting x and y location. In other words, that's the starting x and y location. You need to specify the width of the column, which in this case is stored in this column width variable, and the height of the column. So this statement right here will draw this top column at whatever column x is equal to and whatever column width and column height are initially set to. But how do we draw this bottom one? And this is the one where it gets a little bit more exciting. I want to know, and I actually gave you a hint already. You already know what these two coordinates are because we just solved it. But how do you figure out how tall to draw it and how wide to draw this bottom one? Hint, it should be the same width as the top one. And the height is going to be a little bit more challenging. You're going to have to do some subtraction. I'll give you one hint on this one. Remember that the total height of the screen is defined automatically in the height variable. And so you can simply use this and perhaps subtract some numbers to figure out how tall this bottom column is going to be. What I'd like you to do is, this is checkpoint 14, just show your Floppy Bird with columns moving across the screen. The columns can disappear when they go off the left. You might have to start out column x equal to width to make it work. And I realize this might take a little more time because I'm not giving you the complete code this time. So you're going to have to do some things inside of your draw method besides defining these variables to make this one work. And hopefully this will get you started and working on the next part, which will be the score part. And we'll talk a little bit more about this next time. With that, good luck, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.